In the next segment, you're going to see a perfect example of whole brain consulting. Mr. Bruce Wright has been invited in to evaluate the tax ramifications of a transaction. Once you see his approach, you will understand that the transaction was being evaluated initially from an entirely left brain point of view. And it took a holistic or whole brain approach to understand that in reality, the right questions were not being asked. Bruce, I want you to tie consulting to a specific story you told me.
I do remember that story. Yeah, it was, you know, and it's actually a fairly typical example of some of the trouble I get myself into with advisors. But there were some advisors in California who had hired one of my companies to do a second opinion. And the basic question that we were evaluating was this: how will this father and son buy out the dad's two sisters or the two aunts? How will we buy them out in the most tax-effective way possible? Because the sisters no longer wanted to be involved at all in the agricultural business that they had inherited from their parents. It was very interesting because the dynamics of the story were a classic study in a whole series of really unwise decision making. And we'll start with a basic unwise decision, which was that mom and dad, who had built the family farm, decided that when they were dead, they were going to divide it into thirds. And they were going to give each of their daughters 1/3, and they were going to take 1/3, and instead of just giving all of it to their son, they were going to split it 60-40 between their son and their grandson, so that the father and son could work together and run the family business. And the father and son were working 7 days a week, almost 365 days a year, running the family business. The sisters were collecting a significant income, and they weren't doing anything whatsoever to help the business in any way. They were just living off of the success and the work product of their brother and their nephew. So that was I think, an unfair and unwise way for the parents to set it up in the first place. But they were operating under the old meme that equal is fair. But in this case, it wasn't fair at all, because all of the work was being done by two people, and they were only splitting 1/3 between them. So you could see why they were interested in buying out the two sisters and figuring out how to do it. So what I did was we took a look with our team, and we evaluated the situation, and we concluded that all of the numbers were done perfectly. The lawyer, the accountant, the financial advisor that were representing these clients had done a brilliant job. They crossed the T's, they dotted the I's. It was absolutely fantastic. So I wrote a letter and I sent it off and said, you crossed the T's, dotted the I's, this is what makes sense. And then I got a phone call, and they said, well, we'd like you to come to Fresno and sit down in a meeting with us and talk about this. And I think it was July or August. And Fresno's not a bad place. It's a nice place, but do you really want to go there in August? So I was trying to talk my way out of it, and there was really no way to do it gracefully. So I found myself flying up to Fresno, California for this meeting. Now I get up there, and it's at the financial advisor's office, and there's a big conference table, and the accountant is there, and the financial advisor's there, the father and the son are there, and I think the lawyer canceled at the last minute. And they began the meeting, and and I said, well, I'm not exactly sure why it is you need me here, but I think you crossed the T's, dotted the I's, you answered the question. This is the most cost-effective, tax-effective way to do this. And the accountant in particular had done a great job. He had a couple of different banks lined up. They were going to loan the $20 million to the father and son so they could buy out the two sisters at $10 million apiece. And it was, all the documents were drawn up. This is ready to go. And a lot of work had gone into it. So you could see there was a big investment in doing the deal based on the question that was being asked, which was, what's the most cost and tax effective way to buy out the two sisters? And that was the question that had been addressed wonderfully. And so we were sitting there having the conversation, and the father looks at me and he says, I just feel like we're missing something. And that's why we invited you up here, because we just feel like there's something missing. We can't quite put our finger on it. We don't know exactly what it is. Maybe you can help us figure that out. And I looked at the son, who was probably 30 years old, and the dad was about 60. And I looked at the son, and he really didn't have much to say. I don't think he really wanted to be in the meeting, actually. But he said, yeah, we don't know, we're missing something, and my dad's uncomfortable. And that was about all he said. And so I thought about it for just a second, and I looked over at the dad, and I said, is that your day planner? And he said, yes. I said, can I see it for a minute? And he handed it to me. And it was just a classic day planner, and I just took it, and I opened it up, and I closed it, and I just threw it over my shoulder across the room, which is a really, really odd thing to do when you think about it. That had probably never happened to any of them even once in their lives. So they thought I'd kind of lost my mind, right? So I said, well, now I've thrown away your calendar. And there you are with no idea what you're going to do next. And if we were going to take a blank sheet of paper and just create your ideal life and your perfect calendar, what would that look like? And I had my notepad out, and I picked up my pen, and I was ready to start writing. And he says, I don't know what you're talking about. I said, well, if you could live your life exactly like you want to, and you could really be who you want to be, and you could do what you want to do every day, what would you do? What would your life really be like? And he gave me this great answer. He said, well, I'd have to check in with my wife. The man had been married for like 35 years or something, and if you've been married that long, you probably have to check in with the boss. I said, well, we'll check in with her later, but let's focus on you right now. And he said, well, I don't think I could do that. There's no possible way that I could do that. I've got a business to run. And he had this list of all these reasons why he couldn't live the life he really wanted to live, right? And he was all caught up in all of these memes. One of his favorite memes, which he must have mentioned about 5 times, was that he wasn't 65 yet. So apparently you can't become financially independent and go live the life you want until you're 65, according to the framework of his belief system. So I said, well, let's just humor me for a minute, and let's just kind of go through the exercise. And I gave each of them a pad and a pen, and they started writing down, the father and the son, they started writing down what they would do every day. And then the son would tell me some of the things he wanted to do, and then the father would say a couple things. And pretty soon they ran out of ideas. And I said, well, is that it? Have you covered everything? And they said, well, yeah. And they had all kinds of cool things they would do, like they would be more involved with the Boy Scouts, and they would be more involved with underprivileged youth, and they would take these great trips, and they would take kids out of the inner city and poverty and show them that the world's a bigger place and help them to see bigger than the gangs and the environment that they're used to. So it was really this grandiose plan. It was really terrific. And so I'm listening to all of this, and finally I said to them, well, I think you're right. I think there's something missing. And they said, well, yeah, that's what we're saying. I said, no, it's really a big thing. There's really something missing here. And the son says, I think we gave you everything. We've been at this for about an hour. How long is this meeting anyway? And I said, well, I got to tell you, I think there's something really important missing, and you guys don't seem to know what it is. And the accountant and the financial advisor were becoming particularly frustrated with me at this point, because this was about an hour-long meeting, and we apparently hadn't accomplished anything according to both of them. And they chimed in and said, well, really, we're paying you a lot of money to be here, and we don't think we've accomplished anything, and we need to wrap this meeting up, and we don't understand where you're going, and it was all this kind of language. So I said to them, well, listen, I appreciate you're a little bit frustrated right now, but bear with me for just a second, because I think I might have figured out what that big missing thing is. And they were all just waiting on the edges of their chairs. And I said, I noticed that in your ideal life and perfect calendar that neither one of you wrote down working 7 days a week, 360 days a year, running this agricultural business. And the father says, well, you said if it was our ideal life and perfect calendar. And I said, yes, I did. And the son says, oh, Dad, don't you get it? If we sell to a third party, you see, then we could go live our ideal life and perfect calendar. And the father says, there's no way we could afford to do that. And I said, really? Well, why not? He goes, well, we don't have enough wealth. I said, well, how much income do you need every year to live this ideal life and perfect calendar? Now, this gentleman is a farming fellow, he grew up in that environment. He doesn't spend a lot of money. his annual income is something like $350,000 a year, and he only lives on about $80,000 a year, net after taxes. He said, well, I need about $80,000 a year net after taxes. Now, the son comes from a totally different dynamic and sort of culture and you know, age group and generation, whatever you want to call it. He said, well, I need about $125,000 to live the life that I want to after taxes. And I said, but the net worth that you share 60-40 is about $10 million, right? And they said, yeah, what's your point? So I looked at the financial advisor and I said, look, if you had $4 million to work with, would you be able to get about $100,000 to $125,000 a year net after taxes for him to live comfortably? He said, well, I think we could probably do that. And I said, now if you had $6 million working with Dad over here, would you be able to get the $85,000 a year that he needs? He goes, well, obviously. And we could take a much lower risk position. He started to go on his little tangent, and I finally had to cut him off because he was selling the investments that he was in his mind already selling, you know. And I said, well, so there you go. You just get a check every month, and you wouldn't have to run a plow or a harvester. You wouldn't have to lay pipe. You wouldn't have to worry about repairing any of the machinery. You wouldn't have to worry about borrowing money from the banks. Your whole life would change. And the father looks at me and says, I am really going to have to talk to my wife about this. You know, I said, well, I understand that. We'll have to talk to her next. And about this time, the accountant was furious, and he just couldn't help himself. And he says, well, wait just a minute. We didn't bring you up here to have you screw up all the work that we've done over the last 6 months putting this whole thing together. You come up here and in, what, an hour and 15 minutes, you completely destroy all of these plans. I don't know who you think you are, but it was a big mistake bringing you up here. And so the dad looks over at him and he says, hey, Charlie, calm down for just a minute. I never looked at life this way before. I never thought about it this way before. So I never really, you know, I didn't really even know what questions to ask you. You asked me, what is the most effective way to buy out your two sisters? And that's the question we answered. And he even said that we did it brilliantly. And I said, well, yes, you did. But you just answered the wrong question. We answered the question the client asked us. And again, the dad says, well, yeah, but I don't know what questions to ask. And the son says, you guys, don't get upset with him. We've just never thought about it this way before. See, we thought we were going to have to be farmers. In fact, I thought I was going to farm till I die and that my kids would farm until they die. And that's the way most farmers that we know think. See, and there you get caught up into that belief system of how you think about your role in the world, how you think about who you are, what you do, and when you do it, and how you do it, and how you're compensated, and how you live your life. Those are all part of your thought process. And a lot of it was sort of infused into your brain by parents and teachers and friends and colleagues and society, if you will. So I think what's so fascinating really about the process is that it gets people outside of their traditional thinking about who they are and where they're going, and causes them to really step back and look at it. Do I really have to wait till I'm 65 before I can go live where I want to live? It was great. The sisters wanted to move from Fresno to the coast because they liked the climate better, and they had a beach house there, each of them, and they wanted to go live at the beach. But see, now you're in a situation where nobody has to live in Fresno unless they want to, because now they're free to live just about anywhere in the world that they want to go. So I asked this question: if you could live anywhere in the world, where would that be? And what is interfering with your ability to live there right now? What is restraining you? What is holding you back? What is limiting you from living the most powerful, majestic, fun, and amazing life that you dare to imagine?